But I just randomly remembered that I probably shared with both of you as well. I went to an interview and I just literally laughed through everything because I was just so nervous. I just couldn't get like a
Oh
word
my
out.
gosh.
So I literally, like, every 5 minutes, they would ask me a question. I start to talk, and then I'm like, I'm so sorry. You're not funny. It's not you guys.
Oh, bless you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Listen In podcast. My name's Aradna.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so we are going to delve into our experiences with actually getting a job. So obviously there's lots of phases to that, from when you apply to having interviews and everything in between. So the three of us all have very interesting experiences. So yeah, let's get into it.
How do we feel about going to interviews then? So the interview process can be so scary for some people. For some people, it's not scary. It's exciting. They love it. They thrive off it. How did you feel about going to interviews?
Yeah, so for me, interviews haven't really been a difficulty or an issue for me prior to working in speech therapy. I had I guess confidence in interviews, and I used to do quite well in them. So in my other roles of retail, or even getting a place at university. But I don't know, with speech and language therapy, I did find the interview process quite difficult. And I think that it was quite, I ended up feeling quite nervous, like more nervous than I used to. And it was just quite challenging for me to go to interviews and to have success during those interviews.
And what about it did you find more challenging?
I think it's quite tricky, like it felt very pressured. And not to say that my other interviews weren't pressured, because like I said, I've done other interviews where it was very competitive and I was fine. But I just found that, I think obviously going back to what we said in another episode, like I'd had a bad experience of placement, number one. So I think my confidence was not great at that point. And I think there were things that were in the way as well, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about more during this conversation. I don't want to kind of jump the gun, but I just found it interesting how many interviews that I had to go to before I got a job.
And how many interviews did you have before you got a job?
I had 8 or 9 interviews.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
had 8 or 9. I remember, like, a year later when I went back to uni to do this talk about what it's like to be a newly qualified therapist. I actually spoke last. There were 3 of us. There was one other girl who was she's white British, and then there was one guy who was on our course as well, white British. And then there was me, and they did their presentations and they were all like, yep, so I had an interview and I got the job, or like I had 2 interviews and I got the job. And then I did mine and I was like, well, that wasn't me. I had like 8 or 9 interviews. like I knew the number at that time. I can't remember now, like 8 or 9. And I remember the lecturer, she was really lovely. Like she really supported me when I was at uni. And her face was like, oh my good, like you could see the shock in her face, that I'd had that many interviews.
And how did that make you feel, seeing her shock, seeing the shock on her face? How did that make you feel?
I didn't really think about it, I didn't really, these things, you don't think about it at the time, but I think it's an indication that something's kind of off. And I think we have to be clear at the end of the day. I know some of the things that I did that didn't help me to do well in the interview. So some of those things we can talk about and I hope that people listen to it and learn from me. But I think that it's interesting, I read a blog recently of someone that I know who's a Black therapist that worked in adults. And she said in this blog that she had 15 interviews before she got her first job. And I just thought, wait a minute.
Goodness me.
I was like,
that
wait,
is a lot.
I had a lot of interviews too. And so had a lot of interviews too. Like, I don't know if somehow those sort of unconscious biases are at play in interviews, and puts up another barrier for you to sort of overcome. So if you have that, we all know that, people have unconscious biases. So then on top of that, you come and you're super nervous and not answering in the way that they want you to, or they need you to. That's like another barrier,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it made me feel very, it made me feel like that I was doing something wrong. There's a few that I know what I did wrong. But it did make me feel like, why aren't is this thing for me after I've spent all this time studying? Is this career actually for me? And will I ever get a job? And I was considering maybe trying something else at one stage. But I got a job in the end, so yeah, I made it.
Well, good. And what about you, Bumi? What was your experience like going to interviews in general?
Yeah, I was thinking about it whilst Ramla was speaking, in terms of, I know she was saying that she's been naturally good at interviews. I just actually thought about it, and I was like, I don't think I've been that good at interviews, even prior to speech and language. I don't know what it was about me, but even some retail jobs will tell me, sorry, can't take you on, regardless of the interview style, if that makes sense. So whether it's a one-to-one interview, a small group, whatever the setting, I think I just wasn't good enough at selling myself. Again, that's not to say there weren't other things in the way, but again, I can't remember ever going to an interview and feeling like, oh, I aced that one, or I was just really good at it, that sort of thing. So I think interviews just naturally, I just don't do naturally well at interviews. And even now, I remember when I had to apply for my Band 6 post, I remember how jittery I felt. And this was within a team that I've worked with for at least 2 years at that point in time. And I'd got really comfortable with working in that team, if that makes sense. But actually seeing them in an interview situation, the jitters came back. And I didn't anticipate it on that level, but it did. So I haven't been one for interviews anyway. And I don't think it helped me much that I took literally, I think nearly a year. Well, not that I wanted to take a year out, but in the end it took me over at least a year between graduation and actually getting my first job. Because once I came out of uni, I was like, I need a little break. So I carried on working. I worked in the care sector at that point in time, and I carried on working for a bit because I was like, I need a break. And I think by the time I was then ready to apply, I just kind of lost my flow, if that makes sense. I was oh, it feels all very new, and oh, would I remember anything from university, all that kind of stuff. So that didn't help. Yeah, I can think of a few things that I did in terms of things that I did wrong, but I think we'll get to that at some point in the conversation in terms of just talking about things we could have done better. But like you said, Arabna, I after a while I lost count of how many interviews I've been in. At least the last time I counted, there was at least 10. And I just started to lose count after that. I was like, there's no point counting. To the point that when I actually got a positive confirmation, so my role when I got my band 5 job, actually when the lady called me, I assumed she was calling me to tell me another I'm sorry. So I wasn't even listening to her. I wasn't listening to her at all. And then she had to say it again for me to get the point. But yeah, it was a tedious experience for me. And I remember my sister used to make comments like, oh, you're naturally good at communicating. What about you then, Anya?
I think similar to both of you, I had a lot of interviews once finishing my degree in speech therapy and looking for a speech therapy specific job. Prior to that, it wasn't too bad because I had retail jobs. I had a few that I didn't get, and then a few that I did get, retail wise. So I had a mixed experience. And then I think post uni speech therapy interviews I found more challenging. And I think similar to what Aradna said, I genuinely didn't have that confidence. I think because of my experience through uni and it just being difficult, I just felt that going to an interview, I just found it really like I don't know, I just associated it as being something just as difficult. And I went for a few interviews, but actually I think before I went to the interviews, I just found it hard even being offered an interview in the first place. Yeah, so I found I was spending lots of time on my application forms, but I just wasn't even getting to that interview point. And that was really disheartening, particularly as Aradna said, I was hearing about lots of other people from our course who had just got jobs straight away, and there I am 6 months in with probably I think there's only one interview or something in that time, or even that time. So it was really hard. And I think I've mentioned in the last episode that I actually wanted to work with adults. That was my passion. And I just could not get a job. I tried applying. I changed my application form, nothing. And the feedback I was getting was that just even to get to the interview stage, I couldn't even get there. But the feedback that I was getting was that I needed to have more experience. And I was thinking, well, my final year placement was with adults. I had an adult placement in my first year, like in the stammering clinic. Then I had another adult placement, which was for aphasia. I'm thinking, well, actually, I've had quite a few adult placements, more than most people in my course. So how have I not got enough experience? And what on earth am I meant to do to get more experience? I started to volunteer. I was volunteering for the Stroke Association at some point. There's lots of different things I was trying to do, but I just couldn't seem to get my foot in the door. So then I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna start to apply for work with children. Because I like children anyway, so I was like, I'll just try this. And I started to apply, and I was getting more success. Although it wasn't a lot, I was still getting more success. So yeah, I ended up going down the route of children. And again, I felt like, I need to have more experience because I'm not getting hired. So that's when I went and I applied for teaching assistant jobs. And I remember when I applied for a teaching assistant job, I went through a recruitment agency and they said to me, wow, you are more than qualified for a teaching assistant job because of your degree in speech therapy. And I remember thinking, okay, great, but
would you hire
I can't
me?
get a job. Yeah, I mean, but they were recruiting for teaching assistant jobs and things like that. And I was like, okay, great, but I'm not getting to that interview stage. So I was really frustrated. But I think speaking to you, Rabna, helped encourage me to keep going.
Yeah, and I think that all the things that you were doing are really good as well. Of, you know, some people, when they finish uni, they do want to go for like another role first to get experience in another, you know, in other things. So they might take an assistant role, or they might. I think the other thing to mention is that I think when we graduated, it was a bit more difficult to get jobs. It wasn't as bad as there was a couple of years before us where there weren't any speech therapy jobs at all.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was like, I remember like people who had graduated before had a really tough time. But by our time, it was better. But I think all the things that you're saying are like good things to do as well. So like, if you can afford to volunteer, you do have the ability to volunteer doing those things like that. But I think the application thing is really important, because I had that thing as well of not getting even through to the interview stage. And it was when I went to the careers advice, they said, actually, you need to structure it like this. So they didn't actually change my sentences or anything. They just structured it in a way that ticked the interviewer's boxes. And I think that that's something that, you know, people who are looking for jobs, any job, need to be aware of, is that there tends to be a structure that they want, and there are usually people that can help you to learn about the structure, because it changes, like everything else, it changes all the time. So if you do have access to those things, access it and get that support to do what you need to get into the interview stage. But yes, it was quite hard. I think it's important to let others know that sometimes you will have this experience of just having this struggle to actually get your foot in the door, but you will eventually get there.
I think you're dropping really good tips, Arabna. I think you've like shared 2 already, in terms of like obviously approaching other people for help, the people that can actually help you structure your application the right way, and also just having that determination in terms of knowing what you want to do. And whilst you guys were speaking, actually, I was thinking back about some of my experiences, and I'll try and share very quickly, just because I think it might be helpful for someone. I remember, because it took me so long, I had like even well-meaning family members and friends telling me, do you think this is the right thing? Try something else. I mean, it got to a point I started to put out CVs for clinical trials. Like I wanted to be a clinical, like work within the clinical research, you know, like for like developing new drugs and stuff like that. And I started to kind of like just like speak to one of my friends who worked in that field, and she gave me like tips and stuff like that to actually like just kind of at least get my foot in the door. But it just didn't feel natural. Like I knew, like obviously like from having placements, I knew that I really wanted to like do speech and language therapy. And then so I think I've obviously having that prior experience kept me going. So actually like just dropping a tip in there as well, that actually I think if people get a chance to work in the area of their interest, like actually doing a bit of like work experience or whatever it is in that particular field, that can actually keep you motivated for like probably when the going gets tough, or like when it's difficult to get a new job, because at least you know for sure that you want to do it. And I think having placement helped me to just stay resolute in my decision. And I remember someone commented after I finally got my job, she was like, I can't believe you stuck with it, like despite everything we said to you, I can't believe you just kept going with it. So definitely being tenacious is definitely a good thing. And I'll just share quickly some of my interview experiences. I'll make it very brief. Like you, Anya, I remember like I went for, I tried to like going to TA roles. In the end, I got some like positions working in special needs school. And I remember that I just kept it very quiet that I had speech and language experience. So the agency recruiting me knew that I did. That's how they could sell it to the school. But when I got to the school, I just didn't mention it, because I just didn't want people to put me on the spot. But again, it was just nice just going into that situation, because again, I didn't have any experience of working in special schools on any of my placements. So it was just nice to actually just go into that situation and learn with fresh eyes, rather than going in and saying, well, I can help you with this and help you with that. So that was really good. I remember like interviewing for SLTTA roles as well, and how they'll tell me I was overqualified. I was like, well, I know, but I can't seem to get a job. So can you at least offer me this, and then I can work my way up? But they weren't having it either. And I remember one really horrible one. I went for a whole day of interview at a school that was a specialist school for children with profound and multiple learning difficulties. And it was a whole day interview. I'm not joking. They literally they had me in a face-to-face interview, like interview situation with about 3 or 4 interviewers. But then they also had me doing real life experience. I had to prepare therapy sessions for 2 children actually. And I had to run I had to do one therapy session and then a small group therapy session to show them. It was a whole day, and they called me at the end of that to tell me that I was okay, but they didn't feel like it was fair to offer me the job without other people trying out. I was like, surely you know I was only
that's
trying to apply for the
ridiculous.
job.
Why did you do it? Why did you even invite me?
That's
exactly
awful.
You could have told me before that. And actually, it was when you're talking I remember that. It's just interesting the number of things that we just stick to the back burners of our minds, isn't it? Just to kind of keep things going for ourselves. But definitely just keep going. If you know that that's what you want to do, don't let the situation deter you. At some point it will happen. Like Arabna said to me, it wasn't your job, and then ultimately my job came.
Yeah, I remember going to different types of interviews. Some of them, now I think about, I'm like, what in the world? But one that sort of stuck out in my mind was a group interview that I went to, which I hate group interviews, number one. I didn't know it was a group interview until they sent the thing. And it was actually in an area outside of London, like quite far, like maybe an hour and a bit driving. And I was the only person of colour at the interview. And actually in the whole area, I didn't really see anybody else. Didn't see any Asians, didn't see anybody. It was just, a majority white area, which is, like I said, I grew up in those sort of areas. It's fine. But I don't know if, because it was a group interview, there's obviously this level of competition of people wanting to show that they are the one, they're the best.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can't stand that. So then, I don't, me personally, I don't think that's the best way to interview people for speech therapy, but that's an aside. So then they'll ask a question, and it was basically whoever was the fastest to start talking would start talking and say everything they could think of under the sun. So then when it came to you didn't really have anything to say. But aside from that interview, what was really interesting is I just didn't feel comfortable there. I just felt so uncomfortable. The manager that was interviewing, it was like a manager and another lady. That manager was so lovely. She was so kind, and she was really, when they say people have kind eyes, she had really kind eyes, and she was really encouraging. And she had quite a nurturing sort of presence. So I just sort of focused on her because I felt uncomfortable with the other applicants as well, to be honest, because they kind of left us, they give you like little tests and things, so then you finish the test and then they take it away to do whatever they do with it. And I don't know if we were having a break or if it was when we were waiting for the interview to start, but they were having conversations and stuff, and I just they weren't really including me or acknowledging me. So I'd say something and they'll just be like, yeah, well, then they'll carry on talking about what they were talking about. And then even when some of the other staff came to the place we were waiting in, there wasn't the sort of interaction wasn't great. I didn't feel it just didn't feel nice. So that didn't help me feel comfortable for the interview anyway. So I remember when I finished that interview, I was just a bit like, if I actually get this job, would I want to work here? Apart from this this lovely manager, apart from her, would I actually feel comfortable working here? And I just felt like, no, I wouldn't. I was still disappointed when I didn't get that job. And what was really nice is she called me and she gave me all this feedback, and she was like, I don't think it'll be long before you get another job. Next time do this, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I didn't feel comfortable there. So I'm glad I didn't get that job. Because yeah, it wouldn't have been nice, I don't think.
Yeah, I think a group interview is a horrible idea. I understand why people do it, because they want to see how you interact in a group setting. So how you interact with others, how you work with others, how you conduct yourself, and what you say, all of those things. But I think as someone new out of uni going into your first job, that's quite a lot. That's quite scary.
Why?
Yeah, because I think as well, you're already feeling stressed because you're going to an interview, and then you've got added pressure of feeling like, oh my gosh, now I have to compete with these other people. I went to a group interview as well, but this is for a retail job. For I won't say. I was just about to say which company it was, but I'll stop myself. But it's a really nice company, and I would have loved to have worked there because I always shop there. But yeah, the interview that I had, the group interview was I just really didn't like it because, like I said, I had to battle, and yeah, it was just not good. It's not good, but and I didn't get it. But it's
fine. This talk is reminding me of like also really silly things that happen at interviews.
Yeah, tell us about some things. Let's
talk
about some mistakes.
Some mistakes.
Yeah,
goodness.
go on then.
So like I went to one interview in London, and like at the beginning of the interview, like we had like a test or something. I had a test in some room, so I did the test, and I had to go sit back in the waiting area, and then they called me in. So the room was set up where so that let's say it was like a square sort of room. So they called me in, and there were 3 of them sitting in a row, sort of at the back of the room. But then like in sort of semicircle sort of formation. But then in the area that I entered, where the door was, there was like a table and a chair. So I walked in, and I sat at the table and the chair. But my body was turned away from them, and they were like, you're supposed to sit here. And then I noticed the chair in front of them. I was like,
oh no.
It was so funny. But we all started laughing. It was just so funny. They were really lovely as well. It's a trust that I know people that work there now and stuff. They were really lovely. I didn't get the job, but it's all good. It's fine. I forgive them. But that was so funny. I was just like, what was I thinking?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Why was that table and chair in that spot?
Why was it there? Especially after like I'd just done a test in another room. So I think in my head I was thinking, oh, I need to do another test, like right in front of the door. So I was like, well, I sat down and I sort of turned and looked at them, and everybody was like, what are you doing?
Oh no, that's so embarrassing. This just reminds me actually of one embarrassing story I've got from an interview. This one wasn't actually that long ago, which is probably worse. But oh my gosh, I went to this interview and I was feeling a bit nervous anyway, but I thought, I'll be fine. I just kind of calmed myself down, sat down, and then the person who's interviewing me said, oh, would you like a drink? And I was like, oh, yeah, please. And she had like a jug of water, and I went to pour the water in the cup. And then I poured it in, it was fine. And then I was just there and I knocked it over. I knocked over my cup. It went all over me. It was so embarrassing. I was wet. I was just wet. And then I was like, oh my gosh. And I was trying to like, and I'm like, oh, don't worry. And I was trying to like find tissue and like clean it up. And then that threw me off. My goodness, for that interview. I tried to pull myself back together, but I was so embarrassed. I was like, of all the things to happen, you can't make this up.
I know.
For myself.
Honestly.
Classic interview jitters.
I know. Yeah. But do you know, funnily enough though, I think So going back to what I was saying earlier, I think part of the reasons why I didn't get some other jobs is because I did lack a lot of confidence. And one thing that I noticed is the first job that I did get, I felt so calm and confident. Not that I was arrogant with it, I just felt fine. I was like, I'm just going to go to this interview. I felt really positive about it. I felt relaxed for the first time in ages. And everything, we had to do a test to start off with, like a written test. I did that test, and then I went into the interview room. I met the managers, who both seemed really lovely. And yeah, I was fine. I was smiling, laughing. I traveled like a good hour and a half to get there because it was out of London. But yeah, it went really well, that interview, and I got the job. And I was really glad to start there. I moved to that area for work. So yeah, I think the way you feel does definitely impact on how the interviews go.
Completely.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think it's so important to have confidence.
Yeah.
And I feel like, just to jump on that, Anya, like I had the same thing where, you know, I probably had more than 8 or 9, to be honest. There's one interview that I went to twice. But I think I got to a stage where I was just like, do you know what? I don't care anymore. I just got to that sort of stage where I was like, if you give me a job, fine. If you don't give me a job, fine. So I think I went in with a bit of and I wouldn't say that people should have a I don't care attitude, but I think there was something about that feeling that came across as confidence.
Yeah,
it wasn't
definitely.
confidence. It was just like, I've actually had enough. Do what you want to do. You ask me these questions. I'm going to answer. You make your decisions. I'm ready to move on if you don't. Like, I had that sort of like bam, 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 bam in my head, and I just went to the interview. So then when I got the job, I was like, oh, like, because you'd had all these failures before, I was just a bit like, oh, okay. Like, and even in the interview, like, I remember, like, afterwards, I remembered that they were complimenting me on my answers, but I think because everything had been so bad before, I was just like, yeah, whatever, like, whatever. Like, next question, can we just get this over and done with, sort of thing. Obviously not with I'm saying this now in a very like jokey sort of way, but yeah, I feel like it came across as confidence. So I think if you actually have confidence, that's great, but if you don't, you have to fake it till you make it. And make sure that you don't put things in your own way, like walking in and sitting where you're not supposed to sit. Or even, I just remembered this other interview, the one that I went to twice, where like, because it was the second time I went, like I knew what they were going to ask me and I prepared for it. But there was one question that they asked me about like commissioners or something, and it was like my weak point at the time, and I'd like revised it and everything. But then they asked me and my mind just went blank. And I was just like, what in the world? What am I going to say? So then I just started saying stuff. And you could see their face like, what are you talking about? And then I was just like,
that happens too.
But yeah, it's really funny that these things, like I say, I think it's so like locked into the confidence thing, because like we said before, I was fine. I did very well. I did you know, competitive things and got through, but something knocked my confidence on top of everything else in life that you deal with coming from a minority group, that we have to sort of caveat here as well. It ends up too much, and it really does affect how you come across.
And from your guys' experiences, from the people who were interviewing you, were any of them from ethnic minorities? Were any of them Black?
No,
not one.
The job that I actually got, the interviewers were from European countries, so they weren't British. Yeah, but no, I did have in some of my London interviews, there were a few people from the other BAME communities, but there weren't any Black interviewers. But we know that we're a minority in the minority in speech therapy, so it's kind of like I guess I didn't expect to see. Now I feel like I would expect that more, because there should be more people of
be more.
yeah.
But, I just thought it'd be interesting, just to think about that, whether that would have played a part, if we went to those interviews and we saw someone who I guess we could relate to on that level, whether that would have made a difference. I don't know. I mean, the people who recruited me in the end were English, you know.
Sorry, all my other jobs that I've ever had and everything else I've been interviewed for, I have never been interviewed by a Black person in this England. I haven't. So it's not like a new thing. But I just think with the whole health, health sector, working for the NHS, things like that, or getting involved in that sector, there is a culture in terms of interviews, interview styles, and who they're looking for as well. That if you're not that person, if you're not that prototype, it's quite hard. Putting your knowledge aside, there are barriers in the way that you have to overcome, on top of being like everybody else and being a new student and being nervous and not having confidence. But me, go ahead, you were going to say something.
Yeah, definitely agree. I was just going to just share, obviously I know that we kind of moved on from mistakes, but I just randomly remembered that I probably shared with both of you as well. I went to an interview and I just literally laughed through everything because I was just so nervous. I just couldn't get a word out. So I literally every 5 minutes they would ask me a question, I'll start to talk, and then I'm like, I'm so sorry. You're not funny. It's not you guys.
Oh, bless you.
They did absolutely everything. They gave me breaks. They offered me water. It just didn't work. I don't know what it was, but I was just so nervous. All I could do was laugh, because I was laughing at how preposterous the situation was. I laughed through it all. But I can definitely relate with what you guys have been talking about as well, in terms of just all the experiences going to interviews. Actually, whilst you're talking, I was saying that I was thinking that I don't know. Again, I agree that I don't know if it would have made a difference if there was something from someone from of BAME origin, on the interview, on any of the interview panels that I've been to. But also, I think sometimes when you do see someone you can relate to, I think it just makes you feel a bit more relaxed, and you feel a bit more well, maybe I can fit in here. But I think there's also a lot of underrepresentation. So if you think about it, I was having this conversation with a colleague actually who's of BAME descent as well, and we're talking about how people actually ploughing the field. So more you're kind of band 3, band 4 type of people. You still get a mix of diverse people, but the more you start to work your way to the top, the less representation of different ethnic people from ethnic backgrounds, the less representation there is. So by the time you actually get to getting interviews with, say, a band 7, for example, or a band 8, there's rarely ever an opportunity for it to be a person of BAME origin. And I'm glad that things are changing now. And actually, just looking in the bulletin, I actually saw in the middle page that there have been conversations in terms of student SLTs and what they thought about diversity and stuff like that. So it's good that we're having this conversation and within our profession as well. And again, like you guys said, you guys know a few more therapists of BAME origin, whereas you guys are the only ones I know. So it's just good that there are more and more people.
There's definitely a lot more now. There's definitely a lot more
comparison.
So I guess to round up then, we've spoken a lot around our kind of journey through interviews, some of the things that we found challenging, some of the mistakes we've made along the way. And we've touched on some general tips, but I kind of want to speak a bit more about that, about our general tips. So what general tips do we have really that we can share with others, with our listeners?
That I remember that one of our lecturers at university, she said to me that the more you know, the more confident you feel. And I think there is truth to that, because you will feel, the more you know, like the more knowledgeable you are, you have confidence to deliver in that capacity. But I think also people undermine or overlook the place of self-esteem, because the truth is, no matter how good you or knowledgeable you are, if you don't feel it or if you don't see it about yourself, you're still going to come off as lacking confidence. So you might be confident you might know more, but your person's not telling you that you do. I mean, I've had situations where I've been in probably like therapy, being observed, for example, and people say, oh, that was really good, well delivered and stuff like that. And all I can think about is the negatives. I'm like, oh, I didn't feel like that, because I can't see myself that way, if that makes sense. So I think absolutely important to actually, apart from having the knowledge, working on your self-confidence as well just brings things together. It just makes builds a fuller picture of who you are really for yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I would say definitely getting the help, as we said earlier in today's discussion, and again, getting support, whether it's like moral support from friends, family, whoever, is really important. And just not giving up. Like, it's not necessarily you. Sometimes it's just not the right job for you, or I think one thing that you really forget when you're starting out and you're going to interviews is that you're interviewing them as well. So that example that I gave about that place where I went and I was uncomfortable, like that was a sign to me that that was probably not where I should be, so you have to kind of look at it on both sides, you as the person, and seeing, can I actually fit into this place? Do I like the way that they're interacting with me? Do I feel judged here? Are they trying to support me as much as they can in an interview? Like, those sort of things, or whatever's important to you in that way. So I think realizing that it's a two-way process as well. And I think it's really important to ask for feedback at whatever stage, because I remember before I went to uni for the help with the application, I applied to one job and I didn't get shortlisted, and I thought, I'm a type of person where I always just think, what's the harm? Like, I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to do whatever. So I emailed the manager and I said, can you give me any feedback on my application? And this manager, she's also I've never met her, but I still remember her name just because of what she did. She sent me the longest email detailing, like, I think she did this it might have been around the same time as uni, so I think it was her advice and the uni's advice actually, saying, oh, this was good, this, do this, and then some interviews they gave me really good feedback of what to do better. Some of them was just ridiculous, but I won't go into that now. So I think it's just like getting feedback and trying to apply that feedback. And I'll say for other speech and language therapy students or any other healthcare person who is also Black like us or from a BAME background, we already know the sort of things, the barriers, the things that we have to go through, whatever. But for me, I feel like try not to focus on that too much, because I feel like that can also make you even more nervous. Try your best to just try your best and see how it goes, and know that you are also worthy of getting that job. All these people going to the interview, they also applied and you were shortlisted just as they were. You also went to university, you are just as qualified. So this is just a system to see whether you fit into the team and whether the team fits to you, is how I would put it now to a younger self of myself. So I think it's important.
On today's episode, we talked about the journey to getting our first SLT jobs, the mistakes we made, the obstacles we encountered, and some tips we hope you find useful for your journey too. We would like to encourage you to share your experiences with us as well. Don't forget to follow us on our social media handles, like, share and subscribe to our podcast. Until next time, bye!